First of all, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, for allowing me to speak on behalf of the California Association of Counties, also known as CSAC, on this very important topic. My name is Oscar Villegas. I'm a Yolo County supervisor, but prior to being a supervisor, I spent nearly 15 years on the city council in West Sacramento, which is just about a mile from here, right across the river. And I can tell you that the time that I spent on the West Sacramento City Council, I worked with some very wise, very creative individuals, Mayor Cabalden being one of them. And I can tell you that over the course of the last 5 years, the issue of homelessness came to our front door in ways we could have never imagined. And as a small city trying to figure out what to do with homelessness, it was very hard to begin to think about where to begin with that issue, let alone where it ends. But most recently, now on the Board of Supervisors and now serving on the Homelessness Ad Hoc Committee, I can tell you that the issues of homelessness have crystallized, for me at least, a bit more now serving on the Board of Supervisors, in part because what I've recognized over the last couple of years is, as you know, all 58 counties are dealing with the issue of homelessness, urban to rural, from one end of the state to the other. There are 58 different challenges unique to each county. But at the end of the day, there are some core essential services that are being provided by every single county up and down the state. There are 4 sort of major categories that have been alluded to this afternoon, or this morning, now this afternoon, but I'd like to just sort of highlight very briefly. First of all, the poverty programs. The poverty programs include CalWorks, CalFresh, and Medi-Cal. Those are essential to providing not only the prevention end of homelessness, but also supporting folks that are trying to get out of it. The behavioral and mental health that's been alluded to, those programs are essential for folks that are actually trying to get out of homelessness. Those are critical programs, as just discussed a few minutes ago. The public safety is the third. Our public safety system with probation, the sheriff's, police department, they know who these folks are just by the sheer number of frequent contacts that they have with folks that are generally homeless. But most important is the housing programs. For those who may not know, counties are on the front lines of actually creating zoning and working with their cities to try to figure out how to ensure that there are sufficient, that whole spectrum of housing, from that emergency shelter to that longer term sustainable housing program that's necessary. So my colleagues and I throughout the state have been working tirelessly to try to figure out what to do and how to be innovative in our approaches. As alluded to earlier with Senator Mitchell in Los Angeles, for example, the board just launched a $100 million homeless initiative, convened more than 18 local policy summits to develop solutions. And these summits include everything from creating a coordinated system, preventing homelessness, providing subsidized housing, increasing income, providing case management and services, and increasing the stock of affordable housing. More closely here in Placer County, they've also embarked on a project whereby they've converted a shelter just last year, a former military barracks that now houses up to 40 people after they discovered that their Placer consortium on homelessness showed that the number of chronic homeless just here in Placer County tripled since 2007. And then many counties using that sort of this housing first model that was been alluded to this morning and this afternoon. We've been very fortunate to be able to partner with the state to implement the CalWorks Housing Support Program, also known as the HSP, where $25 million in state funds have been distributed throughout the state to 44 different counties. But what I'd like to maybe share with you, and I heard many examples of effective practices throughout the state, and that is an experience that we had in Yolo County very recently, just about a year ago. So a relatively smaller county. We don't have a lot of resources to sort of tackle this issue, but I can tell you that the one thing that we are very, very proud of is a program called the Bridge to Housing. Just about a year and a half ago, we partnered with the city of West Sacramento to figure out what we could do with folks. There was an encampment along the river. You can almost hear it from here, how close we are, about a mile from here. And there were 65 people who were chronically homeless, living on the river, had been there on an average of about 5 years. They were living there with their pets. And rather than doing what we've traditionally done, which is to give them, a fair notice that we're going to come through and clear the camp out and expect somehow miraculously that the problem would just simply go away, we decided to partner with the city and do something a little bit different. Now, mind you, we'd never done this before, and it was relatively new. But what we did do before sort of the day that we asked everybody to move from where they were was we spent probably close to about 8 months in advance of the day that we moved everybody to understand, to talk to them each and every one of them individually, because despite the fact that homelessness can be sort of broad brush stroke to say, y'all homeless, we need to figure out what to do, and here's the solution, we discovered very quickly that talking to each and every one of them, and again, these are mothers, brothers, sisters, fathers, grandfathers in some cases, every one of them ended up at that point, at that moment, very differently. And so what we did is we spent the time in advance with some very, very qualified staff that we have at the county to talk to them to figure out what is it that you are going to need on the day that we need to move you to make it as easy as possible. And I can tell you that that was a huge, very valuable, albeit very time intensive. It was well worth it, and I'll share with you the results of that in a moment. But that actually helped us move folks on a date certain to a temporary housing structure for about 4 months, where we worked with them very closely. And then during the course of that time, where we had wraparound intensive services for that 4-month period, folks got stabilized, but again, many months spent in advance trying to figure out what their issues were. We issued them housing vouchers, housing choice vouchers. And as a result of the efforts, I can tell you here now, 12 months, and as a result of the efforts, I can tell you here now, 12 months, we couldn't believe how successful we were. I can tell you that many folks, as Mr. DeLeon indicated earlier, that very smart people told us to avoid this issue with, don't touch it with a 10-foot pole, because it's a no-win situation. We went ahead and embarked on this program regardless, and I can tell you that after 12 months, 32 of the people that received housing vouchers, so 38 vouchers were issued to many of the 65, 53 actually voluntarily went into the program after spending all the time in advance. They stayed for the entire 4-month period, and 38 were issued housing vouchers. Of those 38, 12 months later, 32 of the 38 are still in housing 12 months later. That's an 84% retention rate, which is unheard of. We had no clue that we could make that happen, but we had our best people working on it. And after 12 months of the program, we still have 42 of the 53 participants that are still engaged in wraparound services. That's 79%. So they have now learned the value of those wraparound services. So it's been very, very rewarding to see how successful this project has been, and we've been sharing it with adjacent counties so that they can learn from our lessons learned. The challenges that have been discussed, and I'm not going to belabor them, is the rapid drop in housing vacancy and the corresponding increase in rents. That's a huge struggle for us as we try to figure out what else to do in Yolo County. And then the NIMBY issue, that's the second most difficult challenge. Once we actually find a place, the not in my backyard syndrome surfaces right away. And it's not just, well, I'll just share some opportunities that we discovered after our project in Yolo County. So very quickly, collaborations. It was all about collaborating with our partners, including the cities, nonprofit organizations, faith-based organizations, our family resource centers. And I can tell you the one thing that we did not anticipate is our entire community. There were individuals calling saying, hey, look, this sounds like a really cool thing you guys are doing. How can I help? Can I write a check? Can I go volunteer? So that human capital was something we didn't realize. So those sort of collaborative partnerships are essential. Flexible funding was incredibly important. We needed to have the flexibility to be able to be creative in how we approach this, because we'd never done it before. There was no good example. And then the continuous outreach and case management. So in closing, I'd like to just leave you with this notion, and I indicated this earlier today. You know, every person that ends up homeless has their own sort of unique story, and unless you learn how it is they got to where they are, the likelihood of establishing sort of that trust that you're going to need to keep them in a housing situation is probably going to be diminished. So it's the compassion, the dignity, and the respect, and not just broad brush stroke policies that are going to make this happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor. Congratulations on Yolo's success and ongoing success. You know, this is not something you put to rest and go on. It's constant, everyday attending to, and I'm sure it'll be of great value to your colleagues at CSAC.